Laptops are great for their portability, but when it comes to getting some serious work done, it's often a good idea to get it hooked up to a monitor and peripherals to help you get things done faster. Unfortunately, plugging in all the cables can be a bit tedious and often ends up looking messy. And while you can get port replicators for some laptops, these aren't particularly elegant and still take up a lot of room on the desk. So to solve these problems, we will in this video be building a super sleek wall-mounted laptop docking station that not only looks neat on the wall, but is also super practical, as the laptop can be just slid in place to connect it to all of your devices. Let's get to it. So the first thing we'll need is a sheet of low-density PVC plastic, which is perfect for this project as it's lightweight, easy to work with, and comes in a variety of colours. As it's going to form the main base, the first thing to do to it is cut it down to size. And for aesthetics, I'm going to round off the corners using a coping saw, following it up with some sandpaper for neatness. Size-wise, this base needs to be 3 cm larger than the laptop in all directions, which leaves room for all of the connectors that we'll be adding later, in addition to allowing space for 2 supporting side pieces. These can be made out of the same material and need to have some holes drilled through them for mounting purposes. One thing to check here is whether either of the side pieces will block any vents on the laptop. If they do, mark the vent's position on the offending side piece and carefully carve out a gap for it on the underside, which should allow air to flow freely through the vent. So before we screw these side pieces in place, we need to make 2 little tabs that will later act as locks to stop the laptop from falling out. They can simply be made out of a thin sheet of aluminium using some tin snips, and must be heavily sanded down to round off all the edges so that they won't scratch the laptop when deployed. These can then be attached to the side pieces using some M5 flange head screws. These are supposed to slide through the side pieces easily, but I made my holes slightly too small, so they were a little stiff. Now we can add a few washers to act as spacers and tighten them onto the base. Note that the holes here need to be smaller so that the screw bites in securely. As the tabs are likely going to rotate the screws at this point, which we don't want, we need to back off the screws slightly and add some glue to the underside, which, when dry, should keep the screws in place while still allowing the tabs to be rotated. So why were the washers necessary? Well, they lift up the side pieces just enough to match the inside height of the laptop, which allows the tabs to slide over it to keep it secure. Next, we'll need a selection of cables which we can use to make what's essentially the docking interface. I've got a USB extension, 2 monitor cables, and a power port extension. With the laptop in position on the dock, these cables can all be plugged in, after which we can mould some tack around the area of each plug to prevent the glue we're going to use from touching the laptop or spreading too far. You may want to make some grooves in the base as well to give the glue something extra to adhere to, and it's a good idea to rough up the plastic on each connector for the same reason. The glue I'm using is slow drying epoxy, which has a working time of about an hour. I'd recommend this over the fast drying stuff, as those often set within 10 minutes, which makes it a little bit stressful as you'd have to rush to get it all done in time. So once it's thoroughly mixed, it can be spooned into each tack mould, as well as being added to the underside of each connector. You need to take care when plugging these in so as not to let any glue enter the port at all, which would be quite disastrous for obvious reasons. Once it's in place, some more glue can be added up the sides for some extra strength. They now need to be left until the glue is completely cured, and it's important that they are in a very neutral position for this, not being pushed in any particular direction, so that they will be perfectly in place once set. So once it has set, the tack can be peeled away as much as possible, which leaves the port solidly and securely in position. So much so that the laptop can be slid in and out and they'll remain securely anchored as if set in stone. Now it's time to tidy up the cables, so we can bundle them together with a cable tie and get some black cotton ribbon, wrapping it around and around to tightly bind them together. This makes for a single exit cable that looks really smart. So now there's only one thing left to do, which is to make a covering piece to hide the connectors. I made mine out of a single piece of aluminium and used some tin snips and files to make a little cutout in the middle, which makes a small gap for 2 fingers to make the laptop easier to pull out. To finalise this, you might want to use some water and a very fine grit sandpaper to add micro scratches to its surface, which should give it a brushed look once it's washed and dried. Very nice indeed. This can then be screwed in place, after which the dock is complete. Now, you may have noticed the 4 holes on the base. These are mounting holes to allow it to be mounted onto a wall. For this, it's just a case of using a pencil to mark their positions and adding some raw plugs, which allows the dock to simply be screwed in place. So with that, we can now plug in all of the devices. I used a USB hub to give me 4 USB ports, which was attached to the back of the desk for ease of access, and for power I simply connected the laptop's original power brick to the power port extension. Now the laptop can be slid in place, which is super satisfying by the way, and powered on. As you can see, it looks really neat, especially compared to the other methods I showed you earlier, and it keeps the desk free from clutter, giving you more room. It has a cool industrial look to it as well, thanks to the brushed aluminium, flanged hex screws and cotton covered cable. By the way, to keep the laptop from going into standby with the lid closed, it's just a case of going into power options and changing it to do nothing. You can even set up dual monitors with this, and when you're ready to go, the laptop can simply be pulled out and you can be on your way. Now it's worth noting that to successfully make one of these, your laptop must have at least a monitor port, a power port and a USB port along a single edge. Doesn't matter whether it's the back or one of the sides, as if it is one of the sides, you can make it so that it slides down vertically instead. So I hope you've enjoyed this video, and if you did, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and maybe consider subscribing as well. And if you're really keen, don't forget to click that little bell icon, which will let you know whenever I upload a new project. Other than that, I'm Matt, you've been watching DIY Perks, and I really hope I see you next time. Goodbye for now. If you'd like to see another laptop related project, then why not check this one out, in which I show you how to convert a smashed up laptop into a beautiful desktop PC, with pretty interesting results.